discussion afterwards. Here you are. Okay. Our friendly cameraman here asked me to introduce myself. I'm Bud Hertig from beautiful downtown Eden Prairie, Minnesota. First class out of Southwest High School in Minneapolis. I was a pilot on a C-47 dropping troops and towing gliders in Europe. And I'd just like to start up by telling you a little story about when we were in primary training. The first phase, that is, we were flying the double-wing Stearmans. And you had your group, and you had to solo, and you couldn't solo before 7 hours, but if you didn't solo by 8 hours, you were through. And we had a guy named Harris in our outfit. He was a real fidgety, nervous guy, and came to 7 hours and 59 minutes, and he hadn't soloed, and the instructor found, he says, take it around. So take off, go around, come back and land, that's all you have to do. So Harris took off, came back and landed. He got so excited, he hit the brakes, tea-kettled the steerman. Now he's hanging upside down by his seatbelt, undoes the seatbelt and gets a brain concussion. So anyway, I had something happen, a group of us had something happen that didn't happen to too many pilots, and that is, we went from flight training, we flew Cessna twin engine, got on board a ship and took a ship over to England with no transition training, not knowing what kind of plane we were going to fly. So we get over to this C-47 base, and I see these tremendous, humongous airplanes. I think, how can we ever fly this? And all these grizzled veterans who have been through Africa and Sicily and Italy and everywhere are the ones that are going to show us what to do. So I'm with Harmon, Harwood, Hertig, and Gert. I'm Hertig. And the four of us went through together, and they gave us 10 hours in the left seat, and we were all set to fly. We flew co-pilot for a few months. And our first mission, our missions are entirely different than you bomb guys. First of all, I should tell you, because some people it's interesting, I'm not technical, but the C-47 is two 1,200 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engines. It cruises 165 miles an hour, can go 1,300 to 1,500 miles without refueling. Wingspan is 95 feet, and the payload is 6,000 pounds. I don't understand all that, but we have something else that happened. Our squadron has had, two books written about it. Here's one called On Wings of Troop Carrier World War II by a radio operator from our group. And then I have another one here which I'll show you later. So anyway, we came to our first mission, which was, you people who are in World War buffs, Market Garden, which was, I got there in June, right after D-Day. So Market Garden was the Arnhem drop over in Holland. And if you happen to read the book or see the movie called A Bridge Too Far by Cornelius Ryan, that's what that was about. And it was planned by General Montgomery of the British and General Dempsey of the British. And as it turns out, it was a disaster. But it was an 8-day mission. It was supposed to be a 4-day mission, but there was so much bad weather in between that we couldn't get off the ground in several days. But to give an idea, what we do, we'd fly over at 1,500 feet. When you drop the troops, you drop them at 500 feet. The idea being that the less time they're in the air, the less time they have to get shot going down. And I read a thing the other day that said they drop at 16 feet a second in the parachute. So anyway, we're at pretty low altitude, so you almost throw a rock and hit us. So my first mission was, you get in there, it's a Sunday morning and we're so low, you can see the people coming back from church and they're waving at us, they're happy to see us, and just tons of C-47s. Everywhere look, there's C-47s coming in. And so that was, saw my first shots of flak and so forth at those low altitudes. Anyway, the story I wanted to tell you, I got 8 billion stories to tell you. I want to tell you 2 today. Mission, I'm flying co-pilot, of course, because I've only been over there 3 months. And my pilot is Renwick, and he's now a very good friend of mine. And he was from Minneapolis West High School at that time. He'd gone to West. He's about 3 years older than I am. Am I going too fast? My wife says I talk too fast. Raise your hand if you don't understand. So anyway, after we dropped a total of 35,000 troops, and on the first day we dropped 16,000, and then we because the weather got scattered through the days. Anyway, this is the 6th or 7th day. We take off. We have all Polish troops. The name of the Polish jump master is Captain Hare, H-A-R-E. The name of our airplane was the Wild Hare, H-A-R-E, with the bunny rabbit eating the carrot. And so that, he thought that was a good sign. So anyway, the weather was terrible. We finally take off. We get up to 7,000 feet, and there's only two other planes. One, see, what we had was a pilot, co-pilot, pilot, co-pilot, radio operator, and crew chief. That was our crew. And only the lead planes had a navigator. So we get up there, and one of the lead planes is there with a navigator, so we have to let down over the channel. And so we see the other two planes, so we let down. Finally break out at 200 feet. Weather's just awful. Crossover, don't see the other planes at all, so we're all on our own. And take the heading we're supposed to take, and it looks like we hit the town we were supposed to hit. We're supposed to go up north and then go in, drop the troops. But we get to this one town, and all of a sudden we're sitting at 500 feet, and what we do is you sit there, you sit on a piece of big steel, and you put a flak suit and a helmet on. Because we had no self-sealing gas tanks or anything like you luxurious bomber pilots had. And we had to put that stuff on you, and all of a sudden, rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat, there's just all kinds of noise going on. You know what they're talking about, hail and all the noise and so forth. We do the escape and evasion and full throttle and get the heck out of there. And I said, aren't they lousy shots? And the crew chief says, look at the wing. We had three great big holes in the wing. Still got the paratroopers on. The right engine is shot out. The feather won't prop, so it's going around, washing around. And so we're on one engine with a full load. So the Captain Hare said, you got to go back where we got shot because we want to drop into that territory. It wasn't our drop zone. So we limped along, dropped them out, and then headed, what do you do when you don't know where you are? You head northwest to, no, you're going to hit England, okay? So here we go, we're hitting with no altitude, can't climb because of one engine and a floating prop. So we're at 500 feet, and we finally, I'm telling you, you couldn't see 200 feet. And we finally hit England, the White Cliffs of Dover. So now we're following our way up to looking for a field, and we see a grass field down. Follow this in, and here's a grass field, no windside. So in England, when there weren't windsocks, they had T's. Just like this, they'd have a T just in case there was no wind or something, which way you're going to land. So as it turns out, that was that they hadn't flown there for 2 years. That was a place where they repaired planes, and the T was downwind. So here we are. Here we are with a prop, it turns out the radio didn't work, with the prop feathering, so here we come. And Renwick's pulling back on the throttle, the throttle's off, pulling back on the wheel, and that grass field is going real fast. We keep going, and pretty soon up ahead there's a cabbage patch, barrage balloons, RAF guys running like this. And we never touched the landing gear down on the grass runway. We landed in the cabbage patch because we were into the wind. Tailwind, I should say. And the cabbages were flying, and there's a great big fence, so we both hit left rudder and made a complete ground loop around and stopped the airplane before we went into this big fence. And you know what they say, pilots, if you can walk away from it, it's a good landing, right? So we get there, and Renwick says to the guy when we get off the plane, where are we? And he says, Gravesend. Now, if you've ever been to England, you'll see a bus that says Gravesend. It's a suburb of London. And as it turns out, when we saw the field, we came up the channel, but the weather was so bad you couldn't see the other side of the English Channel. I didn't even know that's what it was. And here was this grass field at Gravesend. So anyway, that's one story. I got a whole bunch of them, but I think I understand I have only 15 minutes, so I just want to make sure I didn't forget anything here, okay? Just to let you know, we can carry 18 paratroops with a full load, and also we have stuff on the bottom of the plane. In our case, we had shovels, and we had a motorcycle, and we ended up landing. The motorcycle was still on the plane. It didn't go, and we salvaged the packs. So Renwick and I had a motorcycle that cuts around it. But that was another thing that didn't help our altitude with that sitting on the bottom of the plane. And let me just see if okay, on that mission, I didn't tell you about the Holland mission. We ended up dropping 35,000 troops in there. It was just a disaster. And many years later, I should tell you, I never thought of, after the war, I came up from the war, I never ever thought about the stuff, you know, after you initially got home and tried to know your fellow friends about what you did in the war, and every time you told a story, theirs was better, as you know, so you never told it these stories. And all of a sudden, I hadn't thought about flying about anything. In 1983, I get a phone call. The guy says, "Are you the Hertig from 50th Troop Carrier Squadron?" I said, "Yeah, who are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm a crew chief, and we're starting a get-together of the group." So we finally had a reunion in 1984, and it was fantastic, and our squadron the squadron is still going in Little Rock, Arkansas, by the way. The 50th Troop Carrier Squadron is still going. We've been down there. They're flying the C-130, which is a transport plane. That's the thing. They're kicking those daisy cutters up. They call it an AC-130 to make it a bomber, I guess, but it's still the transport plane, the C-130. So it's the only thing big enough to kick that daisy cutter out of. Okay, so bridge too far. We're about 1977 now. My daughter goes to a movie with her boyfriend at the Cooper Center Theater called A Bridge Too Far, written by Cornelius Ryan. Cornelius Ryan interviewed 3,500 people, didn't interview me. The world premiere was at the Cooper Center Theater in Minneapolis, and they invited all the celebrities. I didn't get invited. But anyway, my daughter came home from this Bridge Too Far, and I said, "Was there a General Sosabowski in it?" And she says, "Yeah, Gene Hackman played General Sosabowski." And I did cut this out. This was supposed to be the biggest movies ever. Everybody was in it. Robert Redford and Ryan O'Neal and Hank, all these guys. Anyway, so I said to my daughter, I said, "I have a letter from Mr. General Sosabowski." And I went down to the archives and found this letter, which says, "I cannot praise," this is dated 16th October 1944. "I cannot praise too much the perfect dropping which in difficult weather conditions, in spite of strong enemy anti-aircraft fire over the DZ zone, drop zone, was equal to the best dropping during any exercise our group, our group ever had. I should also mention that no casualties have been suffered by my troops during the flight itself. Gallantry and coolness was displayed by the crew of the Wild Hare, which, although damaged, permitted the troops to jump quietly and drop even their equipment." We made another pass and dropped their equipment. So I had this letter from General Sosabowski, and my daughter was really impressed, I'll tell you that. And let me say one more thing about that. Well, keep going. Time is short, isn't it? Huh? So by...
Take your time.
Well, he said it's only at 15 minutes of tape. So now, okay, I'll give you the second mission. Now, some other time I'll tell you some of the other stories. Now I'm flying first pilot, okay, with the Harmon, Harwood, Hertig, and Gert. They made us all first pilots in about, I'm guessing, December, something like that. And the whole job, what we did during the war was we'd load up in southern England, pick up clothes, K rations, C rations, lots of jerry cans of gasoline. We hold a lot of gasoline. And we land over right behind the lines, following pattern across Germany, and let everything out. And then sometimes we bring stretchers of wounded back. One nice thing about our, we could see. We flew mostly 1,500 feet all the time. So it was nice. You guys never got to see anything. You're way up high, but we could see, and we could land at different places. And we landed at many, many airports with no tower. Nothing. They just said you're going to land at this field, and you looked at the windsock, and that's the way you landed. And then we unloaded, and there were usually people there to unload for you. Okay, second mission is called Varsity. This was the mission to end the war, crossing the Rhine at Wessel. And there were 1,500 planes in that. My squadron was the last squadron, and I was the last airplane in the whole mission. They started taking off, we were towing gliders. I had a Jeep and some guys and a bunch of ammunition, so we're towing gliders. And I have this picture, which you might want to take a look at when you get up. This is a picture of a C-47 towing a glider. See, I never had any of this stuff until after we started a squadron reunion. Now I got a house full of airplanes, but I didn't before. But anyway, you might want to take a look at it. It's very interesting. And on this mission, some planes towed 2 gliders with a load. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And so anyway, here we are, 1,500 planes in a mission. And by the way, I've got to put this down. When you you fly towing gliders, instead of flying like this, you fly 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, okay? So I'm back here at number 4, and all these planes up in front of us, and pretty soon, we keep throttling back and keep throttling back. We're going to stall. So Bingham, the captain, full throttle, so we make a complete 360. Would you imagine how fast my glider went? Going around? I didn't give that a thought at the time, but you know, when you're the last guy, mentioned, think how fast he went going around. So we did our complete 360, and now now we go full throttle again, and catch up to, we got to start throttling back, so we do it again. We did that about 4 times, the 360s. And anyway, and we dropped the gliders at about 1,000 feet. And anyway, and so we get back to the base, and about a month later, I'm sitting in by the way, we moved from England to France now, Poix, about 50 miles north of Paris. We're sitting in our tents, that's pretty luxurious. Harman, Harwood, Hertig, and Gert are sitting in our tents, and you can hear a whole bunch of drunks over here, and they said, oops, some of the glider pilots made it back. Well, as it turns out, they couldn't find any cognac, so they went to one of their medic friends, and he gave them 150 proof alcohol, which they mixed with grapefruit juice. So as you can guess, they got pretty bombed. So all of a sudden, this guy named McDonald was the glider pilot I told, okay? He staggers into the tent, he's drunk, he looks at us, he says, which one of you guys is Hertig? And I'm like this, and they're all looking at me. He looked like he was about 6'10". He said, you're the worst damn pilot I ever, you know, and I said, Bingham, let us, I didn't, because of all this going around the circuit, it's funny, he staggered off, and away he went. Anyway, about many years later, and when we were at Little Rock Air Force Base for a reunion, I heard McDonald was going to be there. So I said, somebody, let me know when McDonald comes. So he shows up, and he's only about 5'10" and 150 pounds, but he looked like a great big guy to me. And I walked up to him, and I says, you McDonald? He says, yeah. I said, I'm Hertig. And he said, you're still the worst damn pilot I ever. And then he gave me a big hug, and we shook hands, and everybody lived happily ever after. I just want to say, very fortunate, we have 2, oops, I'll get that. We've had a lot of stuff written about us, thank you very much. That's Sebastian's letter. This mission, the Holland mission I just told you about, was written up by one of our guys. Did anybody ever see this? This is put out by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you know, the big museum 4 times a year. Got a nice write-up, the whole article on that mission I just told you about in Holland. And then there's a museum I'm sure you've never heard of. It's called the Silent Wings Museum. Guess who sponsors that? Glider pilots. And I wrote an article for them on that last mission I told you, which is much better than the way I told it to you. Anyway, here's one book about just our squadron, and this is just full of pictures and a few things. And this other book tells everything, which is really good. It tells everything that about our squadron from the landing in Africa and everything. And there's one more thing I wanted to read here about me being the last. This is in this book, but it says. As the last 50th Squadron tow plane made its 180-degree turn to depart the release zone, release of your rope, of your tow rope, Lieutenant Bud Hertig and piloting the plane number blah blah and its officers and so forth, that aircraft was the last plane of the last squadron of the last troop carrier group on the last airborne combat mission in World War II to utilize gliders. As the pilot of that aircraft, Hertig's name has gone into the record book for all time, a particular time and place in history. So anyway, I hope you'll invite me back, because we had one mission where we had 7 planes, full loading, heading into Germany to a base, and we lost them all. It's an interesting story. There's one other thing, okay? I used to read in our tent. I used to read poetry to Harman, Harwood, Hertig, and Gert. I used to read them poetry every night. And I cut a poem out of the Stars and Stripes, written by anonymous, I'm guessing about February of 45. And it's a picture of the Statue of Liberty. And he wrote this poem. It's called, hope I can get through it, A Woman in the Harbor. There's a woman in the harbor whose arm is stretched to God. She stands and guards the precious miles of earth by feet of trod. She's there both in the sunshine from dusk to break of day, just keeping watch over all her sons who have journeyed far away. She was there back in 17 when all the world was mad. She saw her boys go forward then to give the best they had. And now a quarter century of time has passed us by. She watches them go forth again to march and sail, fly. While there, I never realized how much she meant to me. I took my life for granted in that haven of the free. But now that I have traveled o'er half this troubled earth, I know there is no other land like that which gave me birth. Like all her many thousand sons who now are over there, to God my heavenly Father, I raise this daily prayer, that he will grant I see that land, that one and only sod, with the woman in the harbor, whose arm is stretched to God. Thank you very much.
Did you fly POWs out after the war?
One of the most touching ones I ever had. We flew a bunch of Frenchmen back. We picked them up, I don't know, someplace in Germany, and they were just 110, 120 pounds, had terrible clothes on. And we go over to Paris. We're going to drop them off in Paris. And they saw the Eiffel Tower, and they started crying. Anyway, they get down on the ground, and they start going off the plane. And the band starts playing, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They just collapsed. It was just very touching. So we did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Flew a lot of POWs.
Well, I was going to say that when they evacuated us out of the prison camp, I flew out on the C-47, and the one that was right ahead of us crashed. He didn't make it up very far before he brought it down, and kind of ruffled up the boys that were in the stretchers in that C-47. So I thought, if you were a lousy goddamn pilot of C-47, did you happen to fly that one too?
I wonder, everybody seen this book, Cockpit? I have it. It's no C-47, but it's every other cockpit in there. And here's a book on the DC-3 C-47, and that's it. Thank you.
Another very interesting program today.